So I'm obviously
I'm
off
ready
camera.
when you are. Okay.
Except for the occasional sip. I get
yeah, no, I try to keep that out.
the left hand cameo.
Yeah. I'll try to keep the sipping off camera.
I don't know. Brewing Market may, chip in
Appreciate.
Yeah.
they may. Yeah, that's right. I'll get a sponsor
Yeah.
out of them.
I'm recording, so you can go ahead and start with the first. Okay.
All right, we're ready, right?
Yeah, we're ready.
Okay, you're rolling.
And mobiles are off?
Okay. Yeah.
Actually,
You have
no.
yours off?
Oh, it's okay if it's at a distance, but we can always reword the question. I made sure that mine was on vibrate.
Yeah, I'm totally off.
Okay?
And I am off as well.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Yep. Great. Always need my whoopee.
All right, now you have a mustache. No. Got milk.
Got milk.
All right, so if you could just start with your name and your occupation, what you own and run.
Sure. I'm Eric Skokan, the owner of Black Cat Restaurant, Black Cat Farm out in Boulder. Actually, let me start over.
It doesn't matter because this is just for identification.
Oh, got it. Great. So I'm Eric from Black Cat Restaurant in Boulder, Black Cat Organic Farm, also in Boulder, Bramble and Hare Restaurant, also in Boulder.
So thank you for doing this. This is great. I'm glad we're able to sit down and do this. Can you tell us a little bit about your restaurant? I mean, when I think about farm to table, I think about places that have one or two items on the menu that they got from a local farm, and a lot is made of that. And I have a different sense about what it is that you have tried to accomplish with the connection between your farm and your restaurant.
The original idea that I had for the restaurant was to get produce that I was growing in my garden at home. Harvest a pea and taste it. And if you're standing in your own garden and you happen to eat a pea right off the vine, it's a magical moment. Like that pea that you eat in your garden is I think transportive. Like it's almost as if the world comes to a stop for a moment because the pea is so good, right? And I had one of those moments in my garden, and I thought, man, if I could just bring these peas in, from the garden into the restaurant, my life as a chef, would be so easy. I just put the peas on the plate, and like everyone would go, oh my God, he's the best chef in the whole world, right? And that started the thinking of how. That the quality of the produce that I was serving in the restaurant fundamentally mattered. That exceptional produce was would give me the ability to cook, absolutely memorable, dinners in the restaurant, and in theory would make my life, so much more simple. And straightforward, my life as a chef. I had no idea that that farming was going to be so complicated because I was a gardener, and and gardening is complicated, but it's not that complicated. And and I was a pretty successful gardener, so I thought I'll just grow a lot more, and and then what could possibly go wrong?
What kinds of things go wrong?
Well, geez, I mean, just you name it, and everything can go wrong. One of the big differences in Colorado between gardening and farming is that with gardening, when it's time to water the plants, to irrigate, you walk outside and you turn the spigot on, and if you've set up a system, then all the plants get a little drink and it's all great. It doesn't work that way in a farm. In a farm, water has to be transported, at least in our area, via canals into head gates and then holding ponds, and then you build pump stations, and you have to transport water all over the place. And there's different irrigation styles. Now I know this that are best for some plants and different styles for others. Lettuces absolutely in Colorado need a nice gentle misting of water, which is exactly the thing that would kill a cucumber plant. So you need two fundamentally different irrigation styles. And in that first year of transitioning from a garden into a farm, I realized I had gone down the rabbit hole and was learning. I was learning so much that I had no idea that I was going to be exposed to all of these areas where I needed to learn new things. Irrigation, transporting electricity over longer distances. That's what happens with a farm. Instead of an extension cord, now you need real electricity for pumps and things like that. I taught myself how to weld. I had never driven a tractor before, and then I bought one. And so, starting the tractor, wow, so hard. Then, driving the tractor, then driving the tractor in a straight line. Jeez, who could have known that driving in a straight line could be so hard? Hitching on all of the tools that you put onto a tractor, disc harrow and plow and those sorts of things. It took a day to figure out how to do each one of those things. By the end of that first summer, a lot of really amazing things happened. The end of the summer, as I looked back in that first summer, I could see this collection of spectacular successes. I learned how to drive a tractor. I learned how to design the irrigation system. I was able to grow things at scale, for the first year. I had an unlimited supply of arugula all summer long. Really, just crazy, spectacular successes. And an equal number of spectacular failures. I dropped one of the wheels of a tractor into an irrigation ditch and broke an axle. That required hiring a crane to lift the tractor out, and then a week or two of repair. Oh my God. We ran out of water that first year, so I had to beg and plead to borrow water from other people in order to make the farm, to be able to finish out the farming year. I did a terrible job of growing turnips and rutabagas that first year. No amount of creativity in the kitchen could bring any of those turnips to anywhere close to edible. It was really, and I had grown a lot of them. I had mountainous piles of completely inedible turnips at the end of that first year. And then there were seed failures, and then germination failures, and then the piping of the irrigation system blew up, and we got fire blight on all the pear trees that we planted, and they all died. And and it's like one thing after the other. But at the end of the season, I was a farmer. It was kind of crazy. And I really expected the failures to be disheartening and enough to convince me. I really expected it that at the end of the summer, that I would be done with farming. I got the farming bug out. I tried it, gave it the old college try. I'm going to go back to gardening now, maybe a little wiser, or whatnot. But instead, I was invigorated. It was. I realized how much I love to learn, and that it made the food better in the restaurant, partially because the ingredients were, instead of being 2 weeks old or a month old or whatever, when you get it shipped from California, it's a month old, best case scenario. Instead, it was 2 hours old or 4 hours old, right? So the food on the plate is still alive, right? It's amazing. So partially the food was better because of that, and partially the food was better because instead of using piles of cookbooks to generate ideas for what the next new dish should be, I had a brand new driver for creativity. Now in the mornings, walk through the rows. I have my little whoopee, my coffee that I would, kind of walk along as I'm getting my head, set for what needs to happen for the day, and I'm thinking ahead to what's going to happen at night and the menu that I'm going to write for the night. Being able to do that walking through the rows, passing by the lettuces, passing by, the turnips, the good turnips, not the bad turnips, or the little carrots or whatever. Seeing the vegetables out of the context of how I normally see them as a chef in the restaurant frees up food in a way that it's kind of like you've been looking at one side of your hand your whole life, and then you turn your hand over and you're like, oh my God, there's another whole half to my hand that I've never seen before. And that's for me that one of the magical things in being a chef and a farmer is that I have the chef hat on here, and I think about food in a particular way. Farmers think about the exact same ingredients in a fundamentally different way. In the mornings, I have the farmer hat on, and I think about things, think about the food in one way, and then in the restaurant, I think about it another way, and so I have these waves of ideas of new dishes coming. This 10 years that we've had the farm has been the most intensely creative period. It's insane. The number of new dishes that I'll come up with in a growing season in a year is equal to 5 or 6 years prior to having a farm, right? I can't not think about all these new things to grow. And now it's the winter spring is where we are right now. So now it's like seed catalogs and searching for new varieties and trying new things out and whatnot. The whole world is a possibility. A bunch of those things will fail. A bunch of them will be successful. A few of them will be like so successful, lightning in a bottle, like really, really great things. And so now I have this, this sense of discovery. Let me.
Is that a problem?
Well, I'm not hearing it much.
You're not hearing. It's
I'm
okay
sure
if
it's
we
in the
see a little
background.
motion. It's okay if we
Okay.
see a little.
Yeah, I'm
Got
not
it.
seeing the motion.
It's not a problem.
Yeah.
Great. Oh, sugar.
Here, I'll grab that.
Got it.
You got it?
Yep. Okay, great.
Because the mic that's on you is so targeted to
This?
you
Okay,
locally.
great.
So.
Anyway, so that was a diatribe.
No, that was fantastic. I was thinking, ooh, I could use that.
Good, good.
But could you talk before we move off of
Yeah.
the relationship between the two halves of you?
Yep.
Chef.
Yep.
Could you say a little bit more about the chef and does he need to? Is him leaning forward? Does that?
Well,
matter?
Oh,
have
I'm
to
gonna
adjust
lean.
the
I'm gonna
shot.
lean back. I wanted to be able to see you,
Oh,
or I can do that.
Got that.
I was
Got
making
it.
adjustments
Yeah.
also because I was seeing the light in the background
Yeah.
reflecting, but we're good.
Okay.
We're good.
Could you say a little bit more about when I think of what it means to be a chef in my ideal. A lot hinges on what are the best raw materials that I can obtain. So as a chef, are you motivated? You talked about the farmer in you and how you think forward to the kitchen. Can you switch that and talk a little bit more about the chef in you and when you're in the kitchen, what you're thinking about, you'd like to grow, and how that is manifesting in your practice as a farmer?
Yep.
Does he need to sit back?
Yeah.
Or-
Yeah. I'll sit back.
It
Yeah.
doesn't matter. He can adjust, but I just wanted to
Yep.
know.
So I've been a chef now for 23 years, and I started working in kitchens, cooking, because I love food and I love eating, and I love the processes, the creative part, the craftsmanship that happens in the kitchen. And I think, like a craftsman, that's always been my approach in cooking. I've thought of food really only as clay to a potter or wood to a carpenter, just the raw materials that kind of move along the way. And like a carpenter or a potter, I have certainly preferences for that, for the raw materials and whatnot, but the important thing had always been the idea, the end result that I was looking for at the end, and and the food, the produce was just a means to an end. Really, it was just it was just Play-Doh that I was, I wasn't focused on the Play-Doh, I was focused on the image at the end or whatever. And that's been one of the transformative, parts in growing things, is seeing the produce at various stages along the way, instead of, giant, big carrots that all look the same day after day after day, year round. All the carrots are always exactly the same size when you're a chef. Instead, now I see carrots starting just so small, like thinner than a pencil, and then in all the various stages, all the way until the carrots are as big as my forearm, just massive ones at the end. And that's created opportunities to craft specific, unique dishes to hit each one of those little stages of growth, and really, now I have, the chance to create a dish which allows the carrot to express itself at this stage of growth, really, really perfectly. And so now, when I have my chef hat on, I really think about the importance of two things. One is the speed at which we can harvest and get things into the restaurant. And towards that end, we harvest 6 or 7 days a week. The produce from the farm arrives usually around noon. The cooks arrive around noon or 12:30, and they'll start prepping for the day. So we're harvesting in the morning for the same day, day after day after day after day. And that part is important because time is freshness. And I learned that in the garden with the peas, but it's the same thing with the carrots, or the beets, or the turnips, or the arugula, or whatever. If we can shrink the time in between harvest and selling it, putting it out onto a plate, the quality is spectacular. It really does make our lives, so much easier in the kitchen, instead of having to smoke and mirrors and free range blueberry habanero yada yada vinaigrette that you can throw all over top of the arugula to make it actually taste like something. Instead, we can make a really simple vinaigrette, olive oil, homemade red wine vinegar, a sprig of thyme, toss with arugula and put it on the plate, and then the guests think, oh my God, this is the best arugula I've ever had. It allows us to make food that tastes like food instead of tasting like this kind of crazy creation. So that's all one part, for really driving the freshness part, and not just fresh, like the insanity, the fresh to the point of insanity sort of a thing. That ends up being critical. The other part is that I really think my approach to farming very much is the chef with the chef hat on instead of the farmer with the farm hat on. The varieties that we choose to grow, how we pick, how we harvest, and how we transport is frankly, from a farmer's perspective, is the least efficient. It's the most costly, least efficient way possible. But we do it because it's so much better in the dining room. So, for example, a typical green bean, is about, whatever that is, like 6 inches long, 7 inches long, something like that. And green beans normally are sold by the pound. And so if a green bean is really large, it doesn't take that many green beans to form a pound. We harvest our green beans when they're tiny. It may take 400% more green beans to make a pound, my way of doing it, versus the farm across the street, the farmer who's only a farmer. And his green beans are nice, but mine need to be amazing, right? My green beans need to produce a memorable meal here in this dining room. And I've been given the advice, Eric, you're wasting so much time and money harvesting these little tiny green beans. If you just wait, 10 days to 2 weeks until they size up, you'll make so much more money. But for me, that's not the point. Big green beans, that's not the point. I had those when I grew up, and that's not what I want to eat now. That's not what I want to see, in the dining room. So I look for varieties that have a long, extended harvest window, where just the right number of green beans ripen and get to the right size each day, just the right amount, as opposed to the big commercial farms, 80 acres of green beans on one day. All the green beans in the whole field are perfect, right? And so then they go through and they harvest them all in one day. That does me no good. Yeah.
All right.
Real quick.
Okay.
What we'll do here is just to record 10 seconds of room ambience.
He wants to get
Because
the
I might
sound
do
of
a
that.
noise reduction filter on this, but that's fine. So
I hear a loud refrigerator that I can turn off.
I hear it too. Are you sure we can turn that off?
Yeah.
Okay. So you got your
Yep.
microphone? All right. 10 seconds of room ambience, and then I have a sample that I can choose to use for noise reduction. Good. Okay.
And I can shut off a couple more.
No, I think
we're all right.
I think we're
Okay.
fine.
We also were chatting about any ambient sound that might, like if we were to shoot during the time your restaurant is open, kitchen, any of those kinds of shots. Potentially the sound that comes with it could overlap part of your interview.
Got it.
So we would be fine.
Got it.
So that's something that we can talk about afterwards. But if there would be a possibility of coming in during, let's say, a window before guests arrive, while the kitchen is, while some prep work
Yep.
is happening, and we can get some footage of stuff.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, that's easy.
All right, and so I loved the theme that you, the dual theme that you talked about of craftsmanship and speed, the time between the farm and when it's out in front of the customer. And I want to tie that to the discussion of grain and your decision to grow grain. But before we do, I was wondering if we could just say a little bit about why you think this kind of operation matters to customers. What is
Sure.
your sense of does this make people happy? What kind of pleasure do you think it gives people pleasure to come to a restaurant where they know the chef who is the farmer?
Right, right. I'm sure that if I were to have made this restaurant in some places in the country, that there are communities that wouldn't, necessarily value, what we do, the lengths that we go to make the dinner memorable, to make it just truly spectacular. Because ultimately it's just food on a plate, right? I feel very fortunate that I fell in love with being in Boulder, with the community here. The people in Boulder are spectacular. And I, like everyone here in my community, have felt the same angst about the national food system, where all of our food comes from, has felt over the last 20 years progressively less secure, less safe, less taken care of. I think of what we do here as hospitality in the very, very old-fashioned sense of hospitality, same root word as hospital, ultimately taking care of people. And if our main way of taking care of people is serving food that wasn't taken care of, like, right there's a problem. And at some point in my career, I wasn't able to get past that. I really needed to feel good, not just good, feel very good, like I had done everything possible to create food in the fields that would then take care of the people here. In the end, I think that really comes through. I think people feel the same level of unease that I do about the food system. I think that helps. I should say, I think that helps differentiate what happens in the restaurant here versus what happens in other places. All at the same time, the quality of the food that's on the plate here is without parallel. The food is just fundamentally better. Almost every single night, we have someone in the dining room who will say, "I've hated beets my whole life, and I had yours, and they're spectacular." And I think, and I thank them profusely, and I'm honored. And I have this conversation a lot. And ultimately, it comes down to the fact that the beets were in the ground 6 hours ago, and we cooked them in a really simple way, and we put them on the plate. Like, that's it. That's all we did. And I know I make that sound really simple. It's really hard to have a farm and restaurant together, to fully integrate, to bring all the pieces together. That part is really complicated. We work really hard and deal with so much more than we probably need to in order to get to this place where the beats are just the beats on the plate, but they're the best beats that the person has ever had, right? I'll wait for that to trip over.
We can. Maybe now's a good time because that was a good example. The beat example was perfect. Do you mind if we switch now
No.
to talking about grain?
Yeah.
Because I want to begin by having you talk about what inspired you to start growing grain and
Right.
why why you started doing it, and also, of course, how that transitioned into incorporating it into your menus. If you could.
Yep. So, initially, when I had just the garden, and in that first year when the farm was really small, we were harvesting, every day. But in terms of production, we really only had enough to kind of sprinkle the good stuff on top of the rest of the things that we were serving. We hadn't grown the farm out, and I had, a few philosophical, debates in my head. Is that good enough to put a veneer of high quality over top of something, underneath that wasn't necessarily mine? That the little bit that we were sprinkling, the microgreens and the whatnot, that was certainly much more than anybody else way back then was doing, but somehow it seemed like it was not enough, and I decided that if I could, that the standard needed to be that if I could do it, that I needed to do it, and if I couldn't do it, that I wasn't going to beat myself up about that. And then I started with what I felt at the time were the most important, most highly visual, most impactful parts of the plate. From a chef's perspective, when I look at the plate, you start with the things that you sprinkle on, because those have visual, even in terms of the weight of the plate, there's not that much there, but in terms of the visual part of the plate, it's very impactful. And then it went into the carrots and the root vegetables and the celery and the whatnot, which is starting to become more of the bulk of the plate. And then we started raising animals as we now we're talking about big chunks of the whole of the plate, and we've kind of been working our way down so that we can grow more and more and more of the plate. And grain has always been the base of the food pyramid. It's always the thing that's sustained societies for thousands of years. It's that base level, and it's and I've very much had a top-down method of making it there. And so now, 10 years in, it's very much what we're working on now. There is another theme to this, the farm and the table thing, which is this integration of balancing the needs that we have in the restaurant with the needs that we have in the farm, utilizing the compost that we generate in the restaurant for soil building at the farm, growing cover crops which we can actually harvest and serve in the restaurant, like getting all of those things to come together in a really good way. And it's interesting to me, in fact fascinating, that the integration part ends up being really the magic in grain production for a farm-to-table operation. It's the thing that ends up being the glue or the spider web that holds all the pieces of this integration together. Grain is, the base of the food that we grow, food that we serve here in the restaurant. At the same time, it's cover cropping. At the same time, it's soil building. At the same time, it's feeding the worms and the soil biota. At the same time, it's feeding the animals. Like it connects all of those pieces together. It makes all of those things easier. And keep in mind, I've been a chef. Like I have a chef's brain on, and so now I feel like my transition into being a chef farmer with grain production, now it really is complete. Like now I get it. Now I really get it. Way back when I was just in the garden and I thought I'll just grow lots of peas. I didn't understand, how naive that. And it's a beautiful thought, right? I'll just grow all the peas because the peas are so great, and I'll just put them on the plate, and everyone will be happy. I didn't realize how naive that was, and how deep and involved, and really ultimately beautiful the whole operation would end up being. But now I get it. Growing grains is that piece that has now created a holistic operation where we've ultimately completed the circle. Guests in the dining room, animal husbandry, grain production, vegetable production, all of those things work and push each other along in an increasingly more efficient, cycle, in a cycle that doesn't kick off waste, that improves soil quality year after year after year. This is the model that we as a civilization used 100 or 150 years ago, and it worked really, really well. It might not work well enough to serve millions or billions of people, but in this community, we're able to scale it such that we can improve the soil, improve the environment, improve the health of our community, create fundamentally delicious dinners, right? And have this win-win-win-win-win-win scenario. It's beautiful.
Could you say a little bit about what do we see on the menu here based on the grains that you grow?
Yeah. So now we grow 6 or 7 different varieties of small grains, wheats, amaranth, millet, buckwheat, and such, and we weave those grains into everything. The bread that we serve every night, 100% whole wheat. We bake every single day. We go through literally thousands of pounds of wheat just for the bread that we serve every night. We've been working over the last 2 years on perfecting a whole wheat pasta, simple fettuccine, where if I don't tell you that it's whole wheat, I get the feedback, this is amazing, this is some of the best pasta I've ever had in my whole life. And then I'll say at the table, interestingly, that's whole wheat. And then I got lots of raised eyebrows, like, how do you do that? Well, we've been working on truly excellent, healthy, delicious pasta for years. And we're getting close to, perfection on it. Popovers and pastries and carrot cake and you name it. We grow grains, different grains to fit into each different little niche. Soft wheats, hard wheats, Khorasan. I'm fascinated by buckwheat now. I'm really, intellectually, I'm thinking about buckwheat a lot and running a lot of experiments. I love, absolutely love soba, which is noodles made from buckwheat, Japanese noodles. They have a depth of flavor, a chew that's just so satisfying on a deep level. So it'll probably take me, 2 years or so now that I've started working on buckwheat. I have buckwheat on the brain to come up with truly excellent soba. But that's my mission right now. I'm working on buckwheat, and there are a lot of. I now realize how many steps along the way I need to overcome growing buckwheat, harvesting buckwheat, milling buckwheat, incredibly challenging, and then ultimately getting the flour in here is only half of the process. Then it's actually making the buckwheat into excellent soba. Now I'm not naive, so I give myself 2 years to figure it out. But I love that that intellectual challenge, and I see the potential of growth. Whether it's MIG welding, driving a tractor straight, or making buckwheat. I see them all very similarly for me as opportunities for personal growth, which I'm pretty fortunate to have.
For growth as a craftsman.
Yeah, exactly.
I wanted to ask you, how long were we out of commission when you moved the camera?
Oh, not very long.
No?
No, I was just changing the shutter because I was getting
Okay.
a reflection.
Oh, okay, all right. Because I want to go back and look at it, but we don't need
Yeah,
to.
I think you would have some cover footage perhaps from the
Yeah.
or something.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, we could do that. We can even get some B-roll of that focaccia over there, because when he's talking about focaccia, that's the stuff.
Yep. Yep.
So that's great. Just as an aside,
Uh-huh.
not relevant to the interview, but I go to Slovenia often, and I will be there in mid-May to early June. But they grow a lot of buckwheat there. Buckwheat is really big in their menus, and I have a cookbook, Slovenian cookbook, just focused on buckwheat. It's
Translated?
The left page is in Slovene and the right page is in English, and I will bring that by to lend to you, because I think if you're interested in experimenting with buckwheat, they have some dishes that you might really want to play around with, Central European dishes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm Czech, so yeah,
Well,
yeah.
You'll definitely see some affinity there.
Yep. Yep. Indeed.
All right, back to the interview. I think we're ready to move to talking about the Colorado grain chain now,
Okay.
as the final segment, and what. I'm not sure where to begin because I don't know where things are. I mean, I'm in on the emails,
Yeah.
and it's a fascinating development, and I'm so supportive of seeing it happen. But I'm wondering if you could, both in with your hat on as a farmer chef, but now you're playing a new role as is it president or chair, or I don't know.
Yes, president, and yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm
So start
I
out.
can't
You
wait
are-
for the
you are
next
what?
election.
You
to,
are what?
yeah.
What is
All
your
right.
role?
So yeah, I'm the so I'm the president of the Colorado Grain Chain, which is a state wide organization whose mission is to bring together farmers producing heritage grains, along with malters, millers, bakers, who are all interested in heritage grains, to get them all together at the same table, having conversations, building business relationships, and linking up the efforts of each of the individuals into a common group that will yield excellent food, that will help revive the economy in rural parts of the state, that will fill this niche for customers who are really just so excited about authentically good food. It's really an exciting time, and it's an exciting group to be able to work with. All of us individually have been, millers, bakers, farmers, malters. It turns out we've all been, as individuals, walking through the wilderness, searching for a way to do the thing that we know which is right, which is to grow these older, nutrient-dense, fundamentally delicious grains, and get them out into the market. And it seems at first glance like such an easy thing. There's tremendous demand for ancient grains, and Colorado is one of the best grain growing states in the country, and at the same time we have an educated population who's ready to buy, and we have educated, super creative bakers they see the difference, right? The difference is plain, it's easy to see, and it's significant. You'd think with those elements that it would be so easy to walk into a local store and purchase a loaf of bread that was made from an ancient grain that you felt really good about, that was really, really delicious. And it turns out it's almost impossible to do that. It's almost impossible for a farmer to grow 20 acres or 80 acres of Turkey Red or Khorasan or Sonoran White and sell it out into the open market at a decent enough price that it makes it worth it to grow. It just isn't possible. So the grain chain at its heart is linking together the producers, farmers, the millers in the middle, and the bakers together to create this method of growing grains, ancient grains, and getting them out into the community. 50 years ago, 100 years ago, it was very easy. Each community had a chain built. It was just organic to how commerce happened 50 years ago or 100 years ago. Now with the nationalization of food, in order for me to grow grain and sell it to a local grocery store, it needs to get shipped to Kansas or Missouri or Iowa, mixed with all of the grain from all of the other states, and then it gets sent to through the distribution channel as a mix, and then it comes back to Colorado to a baker to be baked as bread. Right, the chain is broken. So we're hoping to recreate it.
So the focus has much to do with a local chain, and you're stressing the value of that local. What are some of the motivations for stressing the local?
From my perspective, one of the most important pieces in local is that it puts the consumer in a very strong, very powerful position. When an individual consumer calls up, the Wonder Bread factory and says, "Hey, I have a complaint that your bread isn't good enough. The nutrients are stripped away and it's this, that, or the other thing." The power of the individual consumer for Wonder Bread is nothing. You can take it or leave it. Like that's all you can do. But when an individual consumer wags a finger at the local baker, the power dynamic is fundamentally different. The baker listens. Partially because the baker is empathetic and has to look the consumer in the eye, and partially because it's a dollars and cents thing, that each individual consumer is a meaningful piece of the economics of operating a local bakery. And the same thing happens for me as a farmer. When one of my consumers, one of our customers at our farmers market booth comes up and wags a finger, "Eric, your carrots were terrible," or whatever it was, I listen, and I'm highly motivated to do a better job. So for the consumer, I think local always is better, and it's a vehicle for creating higher quality food over time, more nutrient dense food over time, and at the same time, food that's a little less expensive, right? Simply because those are the things that a consumer wants, and now they can voice it. They have the ability. That's part of it. The other part of it is this thought that in each region we should be growing vegetables or grains that are round pegs to round holes, right? That when we focus on local food, really what we're saying is to the farmers is that we want food, we want the best food that this region, that this local area is able to produce. And invariably, the best food for this region is the round peg that goes into the round hole. It's a fundamentally different equation when you're looking at food nationally. If instead of the best food for here, you're looking at the cheapest food all over the place, that's a totally different square peg, square hole, sort of a scenario. And in order to get that, you really ignore the type of peg and the type of hole, and you just rely on chemicals to make all of that stuff happen. By focusing on local, each individual region ultimately is going to have the best 2, 3, 4 wheat varieties that grow right here, instead of the cheapest wheat varieties that are grown nationally. And I think that's a great place for everyone to be. I'd love to go to Georgia or to Tacoma, Washington, and have a loaf of bread and have it be fundamentally different, delicious, like really delicious, but fundamentally different than the loaf of bread that we had here in Boulder. That'd be pretty exciting.
That's great. I think unless if you have any final comments, or do you have any final advice about anything I should ask based on your observations?
No, not at the moment.
That was a great way to end it. This was wonderful.
Awesome.
A lot of
Sorry, it's so wordy.
Huh? No.
Yeah, diatribe-y.
It's better that it came out of out of your framing than all out of mine. I was trying to just go with the prompts and
Sure.
have you go with the answers.
Well, I'm putting your editing skills.
Yeah.
to-
Yeah, we will.